Turkish Airlines presents Business Africa.
Hello and welcome to Business Africa. I am Ronald Kato. This week, tensions heat up in the Red Sea, forcing global shipping giants to avoid the crucial waterway. We assess the implications of Houthi attacks on container ships for trade. Also coming up, Angola seeks new capital to expand oil and gas production. The country aims to auction off 55 new oil and gas blocks by 2025, as well as invest in more terminals and refineries. Plus, panic grips Ethiopia's lenders after Addis Ababa fails to make a coupon payment. With an IMF bailout still far off, credit rating agencies have warned that a sovereign default is imminent. Stay with us for the details. Thank you for joining us. The Bab el Mandeb is a narrow strait between Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, but an estimated 12% of global trade by volume flows through the waterway and roughly 30% of global container traffic. It is a crucial passage for energy shipments, handling over 6 million barrels per day of crude and other petroleum products. Now, attacks on shipping vessels transiting the strait have prompted concerns for global trade.
The hijackings, missile strikes and drone attacks on ships by Yemen's Houthi rebels have forced the world's biggest shipping and logistics companies to suspend shipments through the Red Sea. The news has prompted trepidation in Africa, whose maritime trade transits through the Red Sea. There is even more worry in Egypt, whose Suez Canal is considered the most important and fastest navigation passage connecting Africa, Asia and Europe by bridging the Red Sea and that of the Mediterranean. About 12% of global trade passes through the waterway, which is also a major earner of forex for the North African country. As instability in the Red Sea persists, African countries heavily dependent on oil imports from the Gulf are closely watching the reaction of energy markets. Any slight rises in crude prices, experts believe, would add panic to economies already struggling to recover from COVID and high energy and food prices caused by the war in Ukraine.
Christoph Ruhl is an advisor at Crystal Energy. He previously served as the chief economist at BP. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. How is the instability in the Red Sea affecting global trade, and how are energy markets likely to react?
As far as we see now, not very many implications. I mean, there is about 12% of global trade going through the Suez Canal, assuming a worst-case scenario, which we don't have now, namely that this canal is closed. And about 9% of global oil trade goes through the Suez Canal. But even in the worst case, which is still far away, of the canal being closed, it doesn't mean that oil production stops, or it doesn't mean that oil doesn't reach its customers anymore. All it means is that ships have to go around Cape Horn, around Africa, and that makes their journey much longer and more expensive. It adds about 18 days, I think, to the average journey. And that brings prices and costs a little up, and there may be some nervousness. But again, as long as it is only a bottleneck which can be circumvented, it is not a complete disruption.
Speaking of the Suez Canal, a very critical waterway for global shipping, how concerned is Cairo at the developments in the Red Sea, you think?
I think everybody is concerned, but the concern really is probably less about the revenues losses from a few ships not going through the canal and much more from the threat to maritime traffic in the Red Sea, because the Houthis are one thing, and the reach which they have is local, but they have sponsors. And the fear is, of course, that this escalates, that the US has already said, they're going to protect traffic. Others have already said this is not a good idea if the US is going to interfere. And so the fear is that there is one of two escalations, either a fight, about ships and, blowing up tankers or something like that with some environmental disaster and a much heavier impact on trade somewhere in the Red Sea, or much more likely that if ships stop going around in the Red Sea and the Houthis stop attacking them, among others because there is an American presence there, then they may choose other targets. Just as a comparison, you remember during the Corona days, there was a ship blocking the Suez Canal for a long time because it was stranded there. I think the Evergreen. And global trade did not get disrupted because of that. So it was managed. It was not pleasant, but it was manageable. But when you had also 2 years ago or so, I think, an attack on a Saudi refinery, then the concern was much, much larger. The difference between two scenarios is that in one scenario, there's a threat to production, and in the other scenario, there's a threat to transport.
All of this, Christoph, shows the fragility and the risks to global supply chains. Before long, there was COVID, which really, really wrecked global supply chains. Then came the war in Ukraine, and now the conflict in Gaza, which seems to be escalating. How do you increase the resilience of supply chains?
It is only possible through international collaboration. I mean, we have seen, even in the worst case in the Ukraine, in the dispute about grain deliveries between Russia and the Ukraine, we have seen that state actors ultimately can come to agreements and can let trade continue. It is different, of course, for non-state actors because they have much less accountability. They have different interests. But at the end of the day, you can only make these trade routes more safe by having agreements in place which would allow state actors to protect them against those who are not willing to let free trade flow.
Christoph Ruchel, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Now, despite a global push to wind down the use of fossil fuels, Angola is going big on oil. The country has issued licenses for new exploration and plans to auction off 55 oil and gas blocks by 2025. Africa's second largest oil exporter is also looking to expand its refining capacity. 3 new refineries, Cabinda, Soyo and Lobito, are being built. Here's a report from the second Angola Oil Sector Forum held in Luanda.
The second forum on compliance in the oil sector was held in mid-December in Luanda. Angola's Secretary of State for Oil and Gas presented the government's response to the nation's oil production decline.
We have a general plan to mitigate the sharp decline in production that we are experiencing. In fact, several measures have been approved in this regard, including a national exploration strategy. We also have the bidding program for new concessions, 2019 to 2025, under which we intend to offer at least 50 blocks.
Since the start of 2023, Angola's oil production has fallen short of the target set by the government and is declining compared to 2022. If the firm focused on good practice in the sector, recommendations were formulated to ensure a rebound in oil production.
The measures I presented are the main measures to replace the reserves produced and perhaps increase the country's oil potential.
Barroso held Angola's improved performance in corruption perception indices in 2022, arguing that integrity and compliance are essential tools to ensure the confidence of investors.
We have just ended a campaign dedicated to onshore blocks, which the National Petroleum Institute is evaluating. Generally speaking, it has been positive. So we're launching the oil block so that the country can actually produce more than 1 million barrels of oil a day over the next few years.
The second forum on compliance in the oil sector was organized by Angola's National Oil, Gas and Biofuels Agency.
Ethiopia has missed a coupon payment on its $1 billion euro bond maturing in December 2024, sending its creditors into panic mode. Africa's second most populous country is waiting on debt relief sought under the G20's common framework in 2021. Credit ratings agency S&P Global Ratings downgraded Ethiopia to default after failure to pay the $33 million coupon.
3 days before the coupon payment was due on December 11, Addis Abeba's finance said it was not in a position to pay, citing a fragile external position. The development has prompted worries that the country will be the next in Africa to default, as have Zambia and Ghana. Talks between Addis Ababa and bondholders broke down last week. Ethiopia wants its lenders to extend the repayment period and to lower the interest rate. Ethiopia announced plans in 2021 to seek a debt review under the Common Framework, a G20 initiative designed to facilitate restructuring negotiations in the world's poorest countries. The country cited the coronavirus pandemic and conflict in its north as reasons for debt relief. China was the first Ethiopia's creditors to agree to a new debt service standstill this year before some Paris Club members joined. The finance ministry said it could have paid the December coupon but decided to withhold payment to ensure equitable treatment of all creditors. Fitch Ratings have downgraded Ethiopia's credit rating further into junk territory, saying it was on the verge of a sovereign default.
And that wraps up this episode of Business Africa. I'm Ronald Kato. The news continues on air and online. Bye for now, and I'll see you on the next episode of Business Africa.
Business Africa was presented by Turkish Airlines.